right. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Tessa, for that wonderful overview. So we'll now be going into the submittal process and really how the portal works and everything that's required at each step of the process when submitting a project. So hopefully you all have had access to the portal. If you haven't, I definitely recommend working on getting in there and getting installed. I believe with your initial acceptance email, you should have received the portal guidelines or user guide that will show you how to log in. There are a couple different security emails that are sent with that, so apologies on that, but we do want to make sure it's secure. And as a reminder, there is just one email per each contractor associated within the portal. So if there is a better preferred email than what you originally used when you applied for the program, please feel free to send an email to solarbatterysavings@sdcommunitypower.org and we will update it. But when you do get into the portal, you will see this banner at the top. So it'll show maps, files, projects, budgets, and updates. If you click on the map, that is where you can check for the community of concern eligibility and the CARE-FARA participation. We'll go through those details on the next slide. And then under files, there's three different little windows you can select just below this banner here, which will have projects, templates, and accounts. If you go into projects, it will essentially show you all of the uploaded documents in order of like timeline, so you can easily access any documents that you may have uploaded yourself and just make sure everything is in there. You can also look at that in the project side, but it's just something that's available for you to understand what's recently been submitted. And then you can look in the templates. Templates is a really key window here. So in there, we include the participant enrollment application for customers to sign. We have a fillable version so that you can simply just type it in. We have the T's and C's from OEMs. There are specific OEMs that are requiring that their virtual power plant T's and C's are signed, and we'll talk about that also in a couple of slides. There's a sizing tool. So per Tessa's presentation, she had talked about requiring the projects to have the battery systems charged by the excess solar. And so that is really key. We understand that a couple of battery manufacturers do have the ability to essentially forecast how the site's going to consume energy the following day and prioritize charging the battery specifically based off of weather and how the site's consuming energy. So that instead of the battery charging or being used to charge the home, it's going to the battery instead. But within the sizing tool, we're essentially making sure that the battery participation, so if it is 50%, 60%, 70% of that usable capacity, that can be charged on average on a daily basis across each of the months. So each of the 12 months, it needs to meet that. We are hopefully going to be releasing a recording of how to use that sizing tool in the near future. It does take a little bit of finessing to get kind of understanding of it, but we're happy to provide one-on-one conversations in the meantime to make sure you are all set with that sizing tool. But essentially, it requires the green button data. And then if you are adding new PV or the PV system was recently installed, it will require you to upload the hourly PV data in the kilowatts. So one thing to note, we have seen some that have come in with the watts. So just to make sure it is in kilowatts, and then it will show you on the analysis tab whether or not that system size will work for the the battery system size will work for the solar system size that's installed or being installed. And then we also have the portal user guide, which was also sent off to you when you were approved as a contractor. And then we also have a data authorization. So as Tessa mentioned, customers who have opted out of our service can re-enroll, and we have seen a lot of that happening over the last 2.5 months. And so when that is the case, we actually can't pull the data on our end, and so there is a data authorization form that's required if you're not sharing that green button data or you want to have that data authorization signed in case the customer is concerned about any personal identifiable information being shared. So that's also in there, and I'm sure there's going to be more information in there too as we continue to progress in this program. And then the final window under files is accounts, and that's where you'll find your specific contractor documents. So your self-certification, your application. We're working on getting those all updated right now. So if they are blank, understand that they won't be for long, but something we're working through. And then the third window is the projects. So this is where you can view all projects and create new projects and upload specific project documentation. So we'll walk through those steps and what's required in a couple of slides as well. And then in budget, this is where you can view the budget tracker. It's also available on our program webpage. If you go to sdcommunitypower.org, we do have a programs tab at the top. And if you click on it, the first window that will fall underneath it is the solar battery savings program. If you click on that, you can also view the tracker. But essentially, it will show you how much funding is still available, what's been reserved, and what's been paid out. And then for updates, this is where you can view the weekly updates. We send weekly emails to all of the contractors approved in the program. If there are additional emails you'd like added to that, please send them our way and we can add it to the list. But essentially those updates include, any changes or clarifications that we need to make in the program in terms of questions that we've received from contractors or customers, and just making sure everybody has the same consistent understanding of how the program works. We also have Friday office hours. So those are Friday at 9 a.m. And there we just essentially allow contractors to open up for questions and we'll answer those questions. And so it's a great way of just kind of getting refreshed on the program, and anything that you've got concerns or questions over, to voice those to us. And then other specific program updates, we'll likely put this slideshow in there so that you can access this for future reference. So going into the map, when you go into the portal and you click the map button, something similar to this will show up. It's slightly different colored. The orange represents if you're a market rate customer. The blue will show if you are within a community of concern. But there will be a little search bar up here in the top, and there you can enter either the customer account number or their mailing address. I've actually found that it's more preferred probably for the mailing address to be entered in terms of finding where it is on the map. And then you can locate the customer. A little pin will pop up based on the information that you've selected, and you can click on that pin, and then a box will appear saying Community of Concern, or COC, CARE, and FARA, and there will be a Y or an N next to each of those boxes in the table. And Y indicates yes, that they are in a CARE, FARA, or Community of Concern, and N indicating no, they're not in a CARE, FARA, or Community of Concern. And so this way you can understand what that incentive may be for the customer. If you make a mistake on that participant enrollment application, we also check this on our end. And so if it does happen to be within a community of concern and it's not shown on that participant enrollment application, we will update it, and we'll put a note within the portal as well, so you know that that project has been or is within a CARE or FARA program or within a community of concern, and they're eligible for that higher incentive. And so next, onto the Files tab. So here you'll see Files, and then below the projects, templates, and accounts. So like I mentioned before, templates is really like the key window here for understanding what you can look at. And so like I mentioned before, in here we have the participant enrollment application for you to download for customers. We have the O&M T's and C's. So specifically Tesla, Fortress, Enphase, and Panasonic currently require their virtual power plant T's and C's to be signed by customers. And so that is something we will need submitted before we can process that upfront incentive payment for those specific battery manufacturers. On our webpage and also in the portal, we do have a link for the battery products that are approved in the program. So it has the battery manufacturers, the battery products, whether or not they require T's and C's, and then those usable capacities associated with each of those batteries. And so you can reference that to make sure everything is updated appropriately for the specific battery you are selecting. And then additionally in here, there's the system sizing tool, which is a requirement now for projects going forward to make sure that they're sized appropriately. The portal user guide, as I mentioned, which I highly recommend using if you haven't gone into the portal yet. And then that data authorization for customers who have recently enrolled within SDCP. And then onto the projects tab. So next to files is projects. And in here, this is where you can see all of your specific projects. And so you can sort by status and search and add new projects. So on the left-hand side, sorry, this is a little cut off, but on the left-hand side, it gives you a search button. So you can search for specific project ID, you can search for customer name, address, however you want, but you can search through there. And then you can also search for when a PTO letter has been submitted. So if you know that you're looking for projects that have been finalized, you can filter for that. And then you can also add projects, obviously, in here as well. So we'll walk through that step. So when you click on that Add Project button, this window here will show up. And so you're required to input everything that has a star associated with it. So that includes the customer name, the address, city, zip code, account number, customer email, and then the existing solar and the new solar information. So we need the KWDC, KWAC, and then the annual production, and then the total incentive at the bottom. And so for the existing AC, we're really looking for what's already been installed. If you don't have that information, if you can guess, not guess, but do an accurate assumption based off of how many panels are there, and if you happen to know the panel brand, essentially figuring out what that KW, AC, and DC would be. But it is okay if it is a bit of a guesstimation on that end. And then for the new solar, though, we do require obviously to make sure that that's exact based off of what's being designed for that system. And so the KWAC is really what the PV modules, the statewide PV spreadsheet has, looking at the PTC value for that specific brand and multiplying it by the inverter efficiency, and then obviously the number of panels. If it is a little off, we'll adjust it when we review it on our end. But that is something that we're looking for in terms of specifically customers that are leveraging that solar incentive and making sure that that's as accurate as possible. When they do have a solar incentive associated with it, when that PTO letter is submitted, we will adjust it. It doesn't vary a whole lot, but in case it does, we will adjust it based off of the KW that's available in that PTO letter. And then, yeah, the final upfront incentive payment. Again, if that is incorrect, we will adjust it on our end and put a note within the portal to let you know if anything needs to be changed. So then you'll click continue, and the next step of this is entering in the battery product. So you'll select the OEM, and then the battery products will have a filtered list based on the manufacturer that's selected. The nameplate capacity will auto fill in based on the data on the back end that we have for that battery. And then the number of batteries, so 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the summer enrollment, the winter enrollment. So as Tessa had mentioned before, we are requiring customers to participate at minimum 50% of their battery, but they can participate more. And so in here, this is where you enter that information. And then additionally, we are allowing customers the flexibility to decide if they want to participate for weekday only, or if they want to participate 7 days a week. And then finally, the participant enrollment application. So that needs to be submitted along with the system sizing tool. We are requiring the contract also be submitted, and we'll talk about this in a couple of slides. But if the contract is included within that participant enrollment application, we'll check that on our end. And so it's not a required field in here. But in case it's not, it's a separate document, please update both of those or upload both of those. And then when you go into the projects page, you'll see essentially the list of all of the projects here. This is essentially from our demo or dev environment. And so here you'll be able to see all of the projects listed, and you can expand it from 20 to 40 to 50 to 100 projects. So you can see the full list, and there are pages obviously, so you can go if you've got more than 100. But it'll show you essentially the incentive status and the project status. So when a project has gotten approved for the upfront incentive reservation, we will update the project status to active, as you can see in the 4th column over, and then we'll update the 3rd column over to reflect upfront incentive reserved, or so upfront reserved as it shows here. Once we receive the PTO letter and the specific documentation required with that, we will update it to the upfront paid once we've started processing that payment and it's been told by our finance team that it's been approved for mailing out those checks. And so that's at the point where we'll adjust that to upfront paid. If your project is rejected, we will mark it as rejected or correction needed. So typically if it's correction needed, it's something in regards to missing from the document. So whether it's the contract that's missing or the sizing tool that's missing, or if it's something where the account isn't matching the address or the name on file, that we will put that correction needed into place. And you'll have 5 days starting next week to adjust that. If you are unable to adjust it within the 5 days, that project will get canceled. And then you'll just have to essentially resubmit for a new project, because as we're getting closer to the funding running out, we want to make sure that there's a speed in terms of getting these applications updated. And then it's the same for rejection. We will reject projects specifically for really like the sizing requirement, or if the customer is not within our service territory or not served by us. I believe there's another, or if their account has been closed. And so we will reject it for that, in which case those projects would be rejected, and it's unlikely you'd be able to have them re-reviewed within that 5 days, unless it's something with the system size and you're able to reduce the number of batteries, change the batteries, or add solar to it, or if they're able to get re-enrolled within that time period. So that is that. In terms of the documents required, there's really two different steps in terms of when documents need to be submitted. So one for project approval, and that really is when we reserve that upfront incentive. So for that, we need to, one, make sure that that customer data in those two steps has been entered properly. We need to make sure that participant enrollment application has been completed, signed, and is uploaded into the portal. The contract with the customer, so the contract between you as a contractor and the customer, has been uploaded. The system sizing tool, and making sure that the system size passes, and then the data authorization if the customer is recently re-enrolled, and then a change order if anything has changed within the project size or the products that are selected for that. So those two, or the final one there with the change order, really would be after it's gotten approved. But if there are any changes, we recommend you submitting that change order as soon as possible, so we can make sure that if the incentive does need to be more, that we're adjusting that on our end as the budget continues to be depleted, or reserved, I shouldn't say depleted. And then for the incentive processing, so for that upfront incentive processing, we require a picture of the battery serial number. So that's something that'll need to be submitted. The PTO letter for specifically the battery, but if there is new solar going in, whether or not they're leveraging a solar incentive, we do need that PTO letter as well. And then the T's and C's if the battery requires it. So as I mentioned before, Tesla, Enphase, Panasonic, and Fortress do require T's and C's to be signed. And then once that has all been done, we will process that upfront incentive payment. And then the responsibilities are really shifted over to the battery manufacturer for making sure that the battery performance is getting submitted to us on a quarterly basis. And then the next tab over in the portal is the budget tab. And so you'll see here, this is an older version of the visual, but the top one is on our program webpage, and then the bottom one is what's currently available in the portal. Of course, those numbers are not accurate because this was an older version from our dev environment. But here you can see we have the remaining budget, the reserve budget, and then what's been paid so far, and then that total budget at the bottom. And this is updated in real time based on our application approval. And then finally, the updates tab. I really love this tab. It's a somewhat new update to the portal, but I think it's great because it allows you the ability to get updates from us if you're unable to attend the office hours, or if you somehow miss our weekly update email that we send on Fridays. So we've recently started updating this, so there's not a whole lot of articles in here yet, but we are trying to put in everything that we're making sure there's consistent communication on to contractors in here. So I definitely recommend using this tab, especially if you have any questions about the program or anything like that, and just wanted to stay up to date on what's going on with it as well.